Hey guys, Craig with Latin Escape, Travel and Living, and today we're talking with Miles McMullen.
Hello.
As well as being a prominent expat in Colombia, he's traveled and lived most of his life in various countries in Latin America, including Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. So, Miles, tell us more about yourself. Where are you from? How long have you lived in Colombia, etc.?
I am from Ireland. I'm from the north of Ireland, so I have British and Irish citizenship. But I have lived most of my adult life, Craig, here in Latin America. I lived in Venezuela and Ecuador, and I've been living in Colombia, married to a Colombian now for 14 years. I work as a tour guide, and I'm also an author and illustrator. And recently I've been living completely from my books.
Tell us a little bit more about the differences between Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela.
Um, the first country that I knew very well was probably Venezuela. And it's hard to generalize too much because my life there was different from what it is here. I mean, I was working in a university in Venezuela. I was itching to get out into the wild, which is something I eventually achieved in Ecuador when I started to work as a guide in the Amazon basin in Ecuador. So it's very hard to compare them because my life was different in each of the countries. And here in Colombia, I'm married, I have a family, I work from home, I'm a writer. And my life is actually quite different in the three countries. But one of the things that I would say is that Ecuador is much more accustomed to foreigners. There is a big expat community in Ecuador compared to Colombia. In Venezuela, it's somewhere in between the two. And that makes a big difference in terms of how your life goes in a country, how accustomed the locals are to having foreigners and to dealing with foreigners. So in that sense, I would say Colombia is a bit more of a challenge because they have very few foreigners, but you're a bit of a celebrity in Colombia, and that's a wonderful thing.
What are some of the struggles you've had? What things have you had to get used to?
At the very start, one of the biggest struggles that we always have is with the language. And I quickly realized that there's no such thing as becoming fluent in a second language. No matter how well you speak it, you don't become completely fluent in a second language. And you don't become completely fluent in a second culture either. There are always going to be a few cultural differences that you'll see whenever you live in a foreign country. Other problems that I've had are just your typical problems that any foreigner has here. The level of noise is a little bit higher. Everything takes a little bit longer in a bureaucratic sense. There's a little bit more paperwork involved in things. You have to be organized if you're going to a rural region. And as a tourist guide, I've learned how to do that. But eventually you learn how to do all the different things that you need to do, and there are no problems that cannot be overcome, and that's the important thing. Overcoming problems is part of the spice of life.
What are some of the challenges an expat should expect here?
Adapting to the culture is probably the biggest challenge of all. If you don't already speak Spanish, I would advise you to take some classes and to learn the language. It's going to make everything an awful lot easier if you have the language. Other challenges would probably be driving in the traffic here on a daily basis is definitely a challenge. For that reason, I only use a bicycle. Sometimes there is a challenge in getting things in and out of the country. That is the case in Colombia. It's not the case in some of the neighbouring countries here. But Colombia is particularly difficult for postal service.
Yeah, I've always found I can get things into the country, but getting things out of the country for me is, well, for anyone is extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's sometimes best to wait for a friend to come and to send a package with them. And again, that involves a certain amount of planning to make sure that you have your package ready.
What are some of the cities that expats should consider visiting or moving to?
The three big cities are all destinations for expats. Obviously, Bogota itself is very big, and if you're not used to living in a big megalopolis like Bogota, that may not be an option. Medellin and Cali are a little bit smaller, and they both have a very nice climate actually, and plenty of nice options, small towns and villages in the outskirts, which are very nice for expats. On the smaller side, we have Pereira, Manizales, Santa Marta, Minca, a lot of different options there where you may be a little bit further from the international airports or you may be close to an airport which has fewer connections, but they offer a more peaceful lifestyle.
In
Um,
either, in
sorry.
either way, you're about, what, about an hour away from the airport?
Yeah, all of the places that I've mentioned would be less than 1 hour from the international airport, correct?
How is medical care in Colombia? What about the price of medical care?
Medical care on the whole is cheap, and the medical professionals are out of this world. They're really good, especially things like plastic surgery. I had to have my face reconstructed because of skin cancer, and the price is low. The medical care itself is very good. Sometimes the waiting lists are very long. Sometimes there's a lot of bureaucracy. But in terms of the actual treatment itself, it has been wonderful. I have no complaint.
What are some security precautions that expats should take, or just visitors?
One of the most important things is to consider where you are, be aware of where you are, be aware of the security situation before you go. Speak to local people, speak to other expats. And the second consideration is what time of day you're doing things. It's one thing to be in an area at 12 o'clock in the day, it's another thing there to be there at 12 o'clock at night. So they're the two most important considerations. And it's like everywhere. There are places which have lower crime figures, obviously, but everywhere you can avoid crime simply by being precautious.
Miles, tell us what you like about Colombia and maybe some things you don't like about Colombia.
What I like is the climate, the people, the biodiversity. It's like going back to the Victorian age, where it was possible to explore parts of the world that nobody really knew anything about.
Yeah.
I would say that every time I go out here, I would have something which is publishable in a scientific journal, because there's so many things that haven't been discovered here, and that's unlike anywhere else. I've already mentioned that I just adore the people, the way they're so friendly, they're so open. It's very, very easy to get on with people. It's very easy to make new friendships. It's very easy to meet people. It's very easy to move into new circles and to move out of those circles and then into new ones again. So in that respect, it's absolutely wonderful. What I don't like, it's a bit disconnected from the rest of the world. The postal service is poor, and in that sense, it's harder to do things in certain types of businesses. What else do I not like? Sometimes I miss food from home. Typical expat issues. Obviously, I miss my family, but all in all, as I've said, it's a choice that I've made which has enhanced my life rather than made my life worse. It's not a choice that I would reverse.